Here you can see pretty much every project I do, that's any dance music project I do, is gonna be separated into drums and sidechain, especially for 4 on the floor stuff. It's like really important that you get everything separated. Yeah, let's look at the next chapter. This, I just wanted to be like a really dark, moody, trance roller kind of feel. And before I start this, I gotta give a huge shout out to Nick Chagall, who made this track in 2006 called What You Need, his In Love with Prague remix. Yeah, Nick Chagall from Cosmic Gate did that in 2006, and if you go and listen to it, you'll hear where I got the inspiration for this, so go check that out, and big shout out to Nick. So yeah, let's start with the drums again, and here you can see how I made the kick from scratch. So I started with this instance of kick 2. And you can hear it like has almost no release on it, so it's just the transient, the thud of the kick. And I made it so it sort of skips out 150 hertz because I don't like that frequency as much with kicks, because it kind of clashes with the bass sounds. So I've tried to like envelope the pitch a little bit so it has a nicer curve to it. And then I just add a drum bus here so I could make the transients stick out a little bit more. Again, a little bit of transient shaping and compressing the click of the kick to be more snappy. And then yeah, a few tiny little adjustments here and there. And then I'll layer it with this, just a simple sine wave. Here it's got a little bit of a few harmonics just to make it sound a little bit thicker, because I don't always like using just a plain sine wave. And yeah, you can see it's just got a similar sort of curve on it to the other kick, and I just try and align the phase nicely and check that it's in the right polarity and everything. So yeah. So that becomes, I can hear right now that I didn't do a good job at aligning the phase. I can hear it rumbling a bit. Yeah, that feels better to me. And then with the next thing you'll see in this drum channel is that I have a clap group muted, and you'll hear why they're muted as soon as I unmute them. Honestly, I felt like this tune didn't need claps. Yeah! Come on, everybody! No, it didn't. It wasn't that kind of f***ing tune, so I just got rid of them. And the effect it had is it kind of sped up the tune as well, made it feel a lot faster, and I'm so glad I didn't use claps for this. The other thing I did here, there's not many loops going on. All there is just some shakers that I recorded. So what I'll do is I'll just record as much as possible and get a good loop, or maybe two, and bend them left and right. And then these toms, which are actually, taiko drums, and a little kick from Umaru's sample pack. Big up Umaru. And yeah, not much processing on these either, except for a little bit of reverb, which I've separated into a different chain and just compressed a little bit, because I don't like how on most reverb plugins you just have a dry wet. I like to have dry at the full signal and then be able to mix the reverb in at whatever level I want. So this way I can do that and then also process it a little bit afterwards, separate from the dry channel. And then everything together is just sent into this transient master, which I've just got the attack turned up a little bit and a little bit of sustain turned up as well. Oh yeah, I do have some loops going on. So there's one loop. And a hi-hat. And that's, all being side-chained a little tiny bit by the kick. Another thing I want to show you is that I did some group processing for like risers going into breakdowns and drops and stuff. So I made this little chain. So when I make transitions, I can just pull this up sometimes and it'll work. When I'm going into something, it's just like it controls the dry wet of this Uber mod, I guess. I can't remember how it works. I could do a whole stream about doing these kind of things, but I'm not gonna go into it, so. So there's another one on the whole drum bus, which is just a vocoder on noise setting, that when you set it to all the way wet, it just sounds like a big washed out white noise, reverby kind of sound. And I like that, like leading into stuff and leading out of stuff. It's really cool to make that noisy transition. Let's start with the main focus of this track, which is the bass line. The bass line is really simple, just 3 notes the whole way through, nothing really changes. But again, I wanted to make this a really dark, moody, brooding track, so I didn't want any chords or, just wanted to make it dark and clubby and, warehousey. So here I just made a respace in phase plant. It's just a detuned saw wave with some filters on it. Nothing too fancy, again. And this note modulator, which means the higher the note you press on the keyboard, you can set that value to something. So I set it to the cutoff, so the higher the note, the higher the cutoff. Yeah, that's the sort of intro version of that patch, and then I made one that for the big drop. So the post-processing, I have dry running into just an EQ. If you, let me solo that. So that's the sub layer. So I just left that alone, maybe took out a little bit of the mids. And then the next, I made a new chain and added a bunch of plugins to mess it up in various ways. So I use a little free Voxengo tube plugin to give that distortion, a little bit of reverb, a lot of reverb. I guess because it was a mono sound, I wanted to make the layer big in stereo, so I used reverb for that. Then a little bit of bit crushing. And then here I use that ring modulation trick with the external sidechain. So the audio coming in from before the effects is triggering this ring modulator. So yeah, the frequency of whatever's coming in, it ring modulates at that frequency, which creates a sort of fake distortion. And again, yeah, this by itself sounds like crap, but as soon as you have them play together, still, it's pretty crude, but in the mix it works. So the next thing I did is I used one of my guitar pedals to create another layer of bass. You can hear it better here. This little guy right here, it has a distortion and a phaser on it, which you can turn on and off independently, and yeah, that's how I got that bass sound. I just ran one of these patches into that, and you can hear all those little clicks. That's because I didn't have my Focusrite set correctly, and it was clicking because I think it's the sample rate wasn't set correctly, so the analog to digital converter was clicking. Yeah, I just didn't fix that. I just left it in like that. I could have gone and fixed it, but that would have just been another element of chaos that I would have been removing from the track. And this is meant to be a dark and moody track. If I start cleaning it up too much, then it's gonna lose that darkness. And then another layer I added is just a clean, silent, another bass sound just to give it a little bit more width when it comes in later. This layer right there. Yeah, just something a little bit cleaner just to layer on top to give it more body, with some phasing going on, and yeah, more stereo widening, because I wanted this to be all the other bass sounds are kind of narrow, so I wanted this one to be way more wide. Yeah, cutting off all the lows. Without all these plugins on it, it's just... So yeah, it's just about layering different bass sounds on top of each other until you get enough volume that you're happy with. Here I've got all my mids, which, all my synths and any melodic stuff goes in here usually. So here's just the lead sound like this. So here my lead sound is actually a bit of guitar I recorded. If you zoom out on the waveform, you can hear I played a bunch of notes and yeah, went with whichever one sounded the best for this part, and then put it in a sampler and simple little melody that reminded me of that Nick Chagall track, but close but not too on the nose. So, which again, it's more like a drone than anything. And then over the top I added a little layer to complement it. And then just another little FM belly synth up on the top. In terms of processing, there's not much going on. I made an effect rack for... Oh, I can see, yeah. So I can control the drive and the cutoff at the same time. When it's lower on the filter, the drive is higher, and vice versa. Yeah, then a little bit of flanger. Then this delay is pretty important because it's creating all the weird little dips in pitch. Because it has this sort of little randomness built into it, which is cool in certain settings. Like, I think in tape mode and when you have the wow and flutter turned up, it has all these little random movements that I really like. I love randomness in electronic music because I feel like electronic music is so stale without any randomness. Like, everything's too controlled. So when there's something that can give me a little loss in control, I love it. So yeah, the delay is just going into some EQ just to shelve off the low end. I didn't even high pass this one. So yeah, if I want something to feel raw and dirty, I'll usually do less high passing than if I want it to sound clean. If something needs less low end, I'll try and shelve it rather than cut it off completely, because it's less natural when you cut it off completely. And you need that warmth in that low end sometimes to make it sound more raw. And then here's another little layer. It's just the same as this, but octaved up. I should note that in all my sidechain routings, people have asked, like, well, don't you want to have your sub be sidechain more than, say, your lead instruments? Well, yeah. With this, I can do it all at once by splitting the sidechain into two bands. So one takes out more of the low end, and this one has a faster attack. So slightly faster attack. So yeah, I can do it all like that instead of having to go through each individual bus and change all the settings individually. But sometimes it's better to do that. You get a different sound that way. This way, I feel like it's better for 4-on-the-floor music because the kick is the most important thing in this kind of music, to me. Like, if you don't have the kick right, then the whole thing falls apart for me. This is a surefire way to make sure everything else feels like an element that is being supported by the kick. Oh yeah, so the effects in this are pretty simple. Some risers. Yeah, and they're all being controlled by this macro to rise in pitch and whatnot. So yeah, just white noise and various stuff like that. I wanted a little bit of effect coming in, like in the second part of the drop, so I made this little effect thing. I feel like with tracks like this, it's really easy for it to get boring very quickly, and I think this is guilty of that a little bit. So I tried to add a little bit of interest with effects and filter movements and stuff like that. Other than that, there's really not much to this track. The breakdown is just the bass line, like high passed and looped and different stuff coming in, and so I chopped up the vocal and I needed some little effect sound to keep it moving through the breakdown. So I just chopped the vocal up and then put a ton of effects on it just to make it sound like a weird effect. Without it, let's hear how it sounds. So yeah, I just add loads of delay, distortion, and a whole bunch of stuff. And ended up sounding like this. And I should also mention, yeah, I took this GQ sample from Sun and Bass 2019.
We're gonna flip it on its head. We're gonna flip it on its head.
You can hear the whole sample, so I just drag it out.
We're gonna flip it on its head. We're gonna turn over the page for the next chapter. Introducing to you the legendary, the one and only, the one who they call Mr. DJ Randall.
Yeah, big up GQ for letting me use that sample and putting his name on the track. Alright, well, thank you so much for tuning in again. I hope this was insightful, and I'll see you next time.